I want them to understand that even if you're a good person, hard worker, that there can be very difficult people that treat you poorly or worse. And to be prepared for that and not to allow it to overcome you and take away your joy of life.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right. Andy, you can become addicted to like candy and such, and are we addicted to Andy candy, so to speak?
Thank you.
It's some wealth of information that oftentimes we don't think or talk about. Because what I was listening to in the last segment, we talked about oftentimes we're taught, go to HR. They're the end all, be all, resolve all when it comes to situations and work. But I'm hearing a different story from you. And again, we want to preface this. This is not legal type information because neither one of us are attorneys. These are subjective to, here is Andy, who is an executive producer, those type of things, that has this type of experience of what he's learned. Andy, let's pick it up back from there. I want to remind people, what is the reason for HR then, if we can't take our problems to them?
Well, look, I don't first want to be depressing or be a naysayer. I'd like this to be, and I believe this topic of workplace bullying can be a very hopeful conversation and a very positive one. And we're going to get more to that. At the end of the last episode we started talking about how you can cope and heal, and we're going to get more into that. But I will say this. People get into HR, Steve, I believe, are really well-meaning and they care about people. You're in your job, I think, because you care about people. I'm doing this work. I can't say I did television and became an executive producer. I cared about people. That was less so. But this role of being an anti-workplace bullying advocate is because I want to help people and allow employees to avoid what I went through. So with that said, I believe people go into HR in a very well-meaning fashion. They want to help employees to have a better circumstance, to circumvent bureaucracy and red tape and all those things. And that's laudable. The problem is that most organizations don't give HR the tools they need and, frankly, the training they need to handle the issue of workplace incivility. We talked. What
kind of training or things of that nature, Andy, would you suggest that maybe these businesses need to formulate, because you think HR has all the answers?
They don't. They should be given the tools. And when we talked in the last episode about the bylaws, and if people missed it, I hope they'll go back and listen. But basically, I'm advocating for very simple bylaws in every company, every supervisor, manager, boss that's listening to this tomorrow. Go into work, create a set of bylaws and codes of conduct that everybody follows in terms of the way they treat one another, the way they talk to one another. And part of that there should be training, just like there is for sexual harassment training. Every job that I've ever had, I had sexual harassment training, and I was glad I did. I think that's a very worthwhile aspect to anybody who's joining an organization. The same should happen as it pertains to how people treat one another, how they talk to one another, how they handle conflict. These are things that, and we alluded to this in the first episode, most managers get no training. They just, because they're good, like you said, at 18, you became a grocery store manager, probably because you showed certain aptitudes even at a young age. But it doesn't sound like anybody said to you, here's how to be a manager. Now, you were in the military. I'm sure you saw good leaders, maybe really bad leaders. And until I got to the Wall Street Journal as global head of video, I had never had any management training either. And for the previous 20 years, I had been an executive producer with staffs of 50 people. I think I'm a very empathetic person. I believe that to my core. It's one of my core values. So I think I brought that to my work. I think that made me a better manager. I'm sure I could have gotten better. I'm sure there were things that my employees thought I should have done better. Absolutely. There's very few perfect bosses. What I would say is, though, we need to train people who are supervising people who have their careers and, frankly, their lives in their hands. Our bosses have our lives in their hands, not just our careers, because, again, can I buy the groceries this week? Can I get a new car? Can I pay for college? Our bosses control those things to a great extent. And so it's crucially important to have training, even if it's by people that aren't trained to do so. But bosses know how they want to be treated, and they know how their employees should be treated. And as we said, I got some management executive training at the Wall Street Journal, and it made me I thought I was a really good manager. And I realized I had a long way to go. And if I can tell you one other thing, as an executive producer, Steve, in control rooms and in meetings, I slammed some tables. I did. Not proud of it. I raised my voice. Not proud of it. I interrupted people whose ideas I disagreed with, who were my team members. And when I started writing my book, I learned some of these things, and I thought about them, and I thought, was I a bully boss? It was frightening to think, here I am writing a book about it and thinking. And then I talked to Dr. Gary Namey, who was the founder of the anti-workplace bullying work in this country. He started the Workplace Bullying Institute. He's kind of a mentor of mine, and he taught me a lot about what I'm preaching to this day. He said to me, Andy, did you do it to the same person when you raised your voice or lost your temper even, which I didn't do very often, but I have to admit, I have to say I did. I said, no, it wasn't at the same person. And he goes, well, how often? Well, might have happened once every couple months probably. And even more so, interrupting people probably, more than it should have. He said, in the worst examples, did you ever apologize? I said, yeah, I went home and I felt terrible. And yes, I came in the next day, apologized, and repaired the relationship as best I could. He goes, you're not a bully boss. So that's that. But we need to train our executive team, our senior team, the differences between good, fair, even hard managing. Sometimes you have to have tough conversations. Sometimes you lose your temper. Sometimes you have low blood sugar. But we need to understand the differences. And the difference, again, is, and I'll repeat it because we talked about it in the first episode, is if your employees think you have their back and you have their futures in mind, even when you're being tough on them, I don't consider that bullying. And when I was, the worst bullying I ever experienced was when I was certain that the people were out to get me.
So Andy, I'm glad that you shared that, because that's where I was kind of going in my thought process of, we can probably recognize sometimes people have certain personality disorders that the sense of entitlement or grandiose thoughts, those type of things that oftentimes, unfortunately, we do have bosses that come across that way, and they're not realizing what they're doing as part of bullying per se. But here you are, you're in a leadership position, but any kind of position where somebody imposes themselves over you is a form of bullying. But Andy, you mentioned that you had guilt and shame. And so what can people do if they're starting to feel guilt and shame? How long should they wait until they're certain, oh, I'm being bullied? But then oftentimes it's, well, here's the thing. I don't want to rock the boat, Andy. I don't want to lose my job if I mention something. That's a sign of bullying right there in the mindset.
Yeah. And you've mentioned this, and I want to bring it up now. What's so debilitating is just that you don't know why it's happening. You can't figure it out, and you feel shamed, just like you might on the playground at 7 years old when the guy's got his knees on your shoulders and humiliating you in front of your classmates. In this case, people in the office know when somebody's the target of bullying, and you become a pariah in many sense because they don't want to look like they're friends with you, because the bully boss might see that and think, and oftentimes if there's a bully boss, the bully boss can tell who kind of likes what they're doing and who really doesn't like that. And then they'll go after, and I was one of those people. I didn't like bullying. I said in the first episode that I was hazed in college. And I told, after it happened to me, and it's similar to work. I think you'll appreciate this, Steve. When when you're going through the interview process, they tell you, "Oh, you're great. You're perfect for this. You'd be great here." And then you're in the job for about a month or two, and the bully boss finds you. In fraternity hazing, the guys wine you and dine you, and they drink beer together, and, "Oh, you're our kind of guy, and we want you," and everybody hugs when you get to join the fraternity, and you've got all these big brothers. Now you've got 50 big brothers who are going to take care of you, and you're a freshman in college. It's awful. It's an abuse of power, and it's awful. So when you start to feel that shame and that guilt and that frustration, you really need to look at it and start taking care of yourself. And again, we touched on it in the last episode, but it really isn't about turning the bully boss around. And you also touched on this a moment ago, and I want to bring it back up, which is it is possible. And I used to call one of my bosses kind of a sniper. He would target you, and his assistant used to say, "The boss would like a word." She was British. And that was the worst thing you could hear, Steve. The boss wanted a word with you, because then you were like a dead man walking, because you'd walk to his office and you knew that it was going to be tough. It was going to be rough.
That's conditioned behavior, because when you're in elementary school, we would send Steve down to the principal's office, and what do you hear? "Ooh, you're in trouble."
Right.
As you're walking out this door, and we condition ourselves, and you show up at the principal's office, it's like, "Hey, you made the president's honor roll. Let's have time for a reward or a lunch." And it's like we condition ourselves sometimes. And so oftentimes it's going back into what you shared earlier. We got to do the mind exercise of filtering.
Correct.
For a moment, when as a faith-based person, I think about the passage that says, "Protect your heart and what flows from it." When I talk to my clients, I often tell them it's like a prison guard. We're going to filter what comes into the prison for contraband. We're going to filter what comes out, so that neither party is hurting one another. But the one critical piece that we often forget is that prison guard also observes the behavior within. Mm-hmm. And that's so crucial within ourselves, because we can get into that self-defeatist mode. I'm not good enough. The boss is hounding me and stuff. But here's a caveat, a spin to this, Andy, is because like you said, I fit a great way of getting into management, but I've learned management along the way. Have I made mistakes? Sure. Have I been termed? For sure. But when I think about the one mentor that I had, he says, when you have a target on your back, you know you're doing the right thing. What's the difference between that and being bullied?
Well, I'm not sure I agree in a sense. I mean, one thing is, like, if you're a football fan and you won the championship and now every team is coming after you and you have a target on your back, yes, that's a good thing, because you've experienced success and now everyone's kind of gearing up to try to take you down. Fair enough.
Okay.
In my world, the target is in a similar fashion, because you're a nice person, you're a good person, you're a good colleague, you're a good team player. And the bully boss sees that and doesn't like it for whatever reason. And I think most bully bosses know they're being mean-spirited. But in the case of, like, the sniper that I had, he would bully me and say mean things to me, whatever. But then I think he very quickly went on to the next person, the next. I don't think he thought about the damage he was doing. In fact, I was in his employ for 6 years. And I admired him in many, many ways. Brilliant person. And I think it's also possible that a bully boss may not recognize what they're doing or how they're doing it, but I think in most cases they do, and they don't care. They don't care, or they enjoy it. They're egoists, or they're sadists, and it's not my job to psychoanalyze them or diagnose their particular malady. I don't spend a lot of time doing that. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how I can help, to your point, help people filter out that information. So when you take that walk to the bully's boss's office, or you get that email that says, WTH, what the hell, or worse, and I got a lot of those, that you don't just allow that to envelop you, that becomes your identity. And that's what happened to me. I allowed it to become all encompassing. And that's who I thought I was. And I forgot to allow other voices in. I forgot to allow other beautiful aspects and joy of life to continue to digest those. I only digested the words of the boss and went back and spent the next 12 hours trying to do better. And then trying to, while I was sleeping, I would have recurring nightmares of this bully boss as half man, half beast attacking me in a boiling cauldron, literally, no joke. This was a recurring nightmare. So I was even trying to process it in my mind while I was sleeping, but I never came, like my son is a wonderfully adapted kid, doesn't have the anxiety I had, hasn't had these kind of experiences. He always dreams that he's a superhero and he wins. That's good stuff. And I'm glad. But I still to this day have dreams about this bully boss, but they're starting to be more where I talk to him and he listens. So I'm coping and healing. That's how I know. And we can talk about coping and healing, but I'm getting better. I'm not having these recurring dreams even decades later where he's still after me or I'm still concerned about my safety.
I'm kind of glad that you had mentioned this, because we only had about 15 minutes. And, although I would like to do a part 4, I do want to get to the part of, hey, here's what you're doing. You wrote a book.
Yeah.
What is the title of the book?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. The book is called Surviving Bully Culture, A Career Navigating Workplace Bullying and a Guide for Coping and Healing. So
I was going to say, out of this book that you wrote, did you find healing within itself just by writing it?
Well, I first off wrote it, to be very honest, because I wanted my kids. I really wrote it for my kids. I wanted them not to grow up with the naivete, and we talked about this in the first episode. I didn't want them to grow up with the naivete that I had. I wanted them to understand that even if you're a good person, hard worker, that there can be very difficult people that treat you poorly or worse. And to be prepared for that and not to allow it to overcome you and to take away your joy of life. As a faith-based person, you understand that there's much more to life than individual kind of transactional relationships.
Right.
Faith and joy and belief systems and people you interact with. So I wrote the book for my kids to understand that their dad had a lot of failures. Now, I had pretty good jobs and a lot of successes, but I wrote the book and I thought, in fact, I'll tell you very quickly, forgive the tangent, but the first title of the book was My Mediocre Career in Television, because I couldn't understand why my bosses didn't love me. And I felt my career was mediocre because of that. Now, people looking at my resume might say, oh, I don't think but I'll let somebody else decide that. As I wrote the book, I realized there was so much incivility involved. I thought, I wonder why, and what's this about? And I finally started to research it. And that's when I realized there's a thing called workplace bullying and that there's studies. And so what I did was I took my story and all my bullying stories and put them together. So I'd like to think that it's an engaging story. I'm kind of an underdog. I hope the reader will root for me. I'm not infallible. I have things that I did that I'm not proud of that are in the book because, again, I'm not perfect. But the point I'm trying to make is that I then interviewed dozens of worldwide experts. Neurobiologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, legal scholars, professors, all kinds of people. And so now the book is what is not a memoir in my view, although there's a lot about me, maybe too much, I'll let the reader decide, because it is a narrative story arc of my career in television. So you meet some famous people that I worked with as well. But it's more about understanding the issue, why this happens, who it happens to, and ultimately what you can do about it so that you can continue to find joy and purpose in work and life and go home, hug your kids, hug your wife, hug your husband, whatever it might be, and be able to enjoy a beautiful garden, a lovely walk in the sun, and not just be so depressed and anxiety ridden that you can't enjoy every day of your life. no matter what's happening in the workplace.
You kind of sound like me a little bit there, Andy. Go find some grounding techniques and being able to release. And, for me, my first book was The Journey, Not the Destination. That was published. And I got the idea of going on my first cruise and going by myself to Alaska, and got the idea of the journey of how often do we carry the baggage around with us that becomes so cumbersome. And then, I received the doctorates, and from my research, that's how the second book came into play. And so I find writing as a form of healing. These are the facts and experiences that I went through. And then, like you, I interviewed a variety of different people to formulate, as a community, we are fearful of discussing who we are as people. And I get it. And I see it, of the disparaging remarks towards people. And I'm like, that only displays the heart of the person that's casting that stone.
Yeah.
And so, Andy, when you think about this book in the next 5 minutes that we have, what was the whole purpose and accomplishment of trying to get this book out there for people to read? What is it, the main crux that you want them to learn that maybe you didn't get a chance to in your career?
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I was silenced, or I silenced myself in my career. I could never say what I wanted to. And this is not revenge memoir, Steve. I'm not getting back at the bullies. In fact, I changed a lot of the names of both the bullies and the bullied, because these people did employ me, and they did pay me. And so that's part of it. But I have great admiration for these people in many respects. But I now have a voice, and I feel like there isn't real dialogue on this issue. And I want to start a movement. Not me alone. There's a number of people in this arena, but we're behind in the United States. So writing the book was cathartic in terms of getting it out of my chest and out of my head in a way. And then it became a mission to bring to light. And I dedicate the book to those who shed their light on others. That's who the book is devoted to, because bullies take our light. We all have a light. I believe that. And bullies darken our light if we allow them to. And so that's my whole goal. This is not a thing to make money. This is a mission of mine now. Look, I could make some money on the book. I don't want to be disingenuous, but believe me, that's not the mission at all. The mission is, because there is so much shame, it is a taboo subject, as you suggested. I want to bring to light the problem. It's a problem that can be solved pretty quickly. It can be addressed. We won't eradicate incivility and degradation. It's part of the human experience. That's okay. But I truly believe with shows like yours, we can teach people, again, what I believe are the 6 tenets, psychological safety, self-esteem, purpose in life and work, positive self-talk, forgiveness, all these things that I work on, that I believe in, can begin to help people. And then I believe if we can get the dialogue going, and get people to pay attention, maybe we can change some laws, and certainly we can get companies to create codes of conduct. So then you don't have to worry so much about yourself and being like, I have to work on myself to not let the bully boss take over my life, which is the one thing we can control. But soon I hope that organizations will stop it before it gets to that point.
So Andy, the goal for me too is also to post this on LinkedIn, which is an executive or professional people, not everybody, but it's for business. Like Facebook is what I kind of call it, for business. Yeah. And it's a great to network. And I wanted to post this there so that leaders there that I'm connected to can also understand this. I heard you say that you do some coaching. Do you do consulting with businesses to help them reduce some of this? What do you do with that?
Yeah. So I focused my attention on the targets, and my coaching business helping targets. That's where I started. I'm now moving to working with HR departments and legal and law firms, because you said it, healthcare is horrible for bullying, the legal profession horrible for bullying. So now I'm moving towards that. But my main focus is to help because the lived experience was that. If I may, if you'll allow me, may I give my website where people can purchase the book or find my counseling services and coaching? And I do speak to organizations as well. Would that be okay?
Yeah, please do that. I'm fine with that.
Okay. So the easiest way to get the book is just to go to andyregal.com, ANDYREGAL.com. And by the time people hear this broadcast, it'll be available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, as well as my publisher's website. So if you go to my website, andyregal.com, or you go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon, if you look up Surviving Bully Culture by Andy Regal, you'll find it. I really hope people like my story, but most importantly, I hope people benefit from the advice, not only that I provide, but that dozens of worldwide experts provide.
Now, Andy, is this open for anybody that feels like their workplace, they're being bullied, or do you have a specific audience that you address?
So with my coaching, I do one-on-one and I do group consulting. I don't call it group therapy because I'm not a therapist. And people feel free to reach out to me at andyregal.com if they want to. I do a free consultation. Again, this is not about a business. It's about a mission. And I truly believe that people are really damaged, really harmed for decades, not just for days or months or even years after. The bullying stays with you. Even when you're applying for the next job, the feelings that the bully made you feel are when you're interviewing. We work on that because sometimes people feel so terrible they don't interview well. There's a lot to this. And I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to bring up so many different issues. And this has really been terrific.
Andy, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you being on the show. We've got to be able to introspect to such a point that we're not harming ourselves to cause us to say we're the blame. Yeah. It's about being able to confront, and many people are afraid to confront. Just the term confront makes you want to shrink.
Yes.
But it is time for us to start working towards a society that's collaborative, that's able to take stones instead of throwing them at each other. Let's build bridges so that we can heal our community, thrive in it, become a successful community. Because there is no place for bullying, whether it's in the home or the workplace. Andy, again, TV executive producer, just thank you so much for your expertise, for being on here.
Sincere thanks, Steve. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
So until next time, take care and God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.